Welcome to the Empowered Modern Witches Show. Join us to learn simple, accessible ways that the seasons, moon phases, and astrology can help you finally create a spiritual self-care practice you can be consistent with. I'm your host, Tanae Stewart, the Witch of Lupin Hollow. I'm a practicing witch, a certified astrologer, and a published author. And I'm on a mission to help modern witches like you nourish your mind, body, and intuition so you can be your most magical self. All day, every day. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm here today with Julie Anne Stratton, who is a musician, a witch, an author, and priestess of the goddess. She's been a practicing witch for over 35 years and has done regular ritual and spell work with all different covens, studying with Germanic, Dianic, Gardnerian, and is now fully in the reclaiming tradition. She is a member of Vermont Witch Camp and organizes camps and large rituals and witchcraft workshops around central New York. And in 2020, her novel, The Witches of Riegersburg, was published, which is a historical fiction novel and women's literature, which we're going to talk about today. Thanks for being here, Julie.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited, and I've been following you for a while, and I just got your magazine, so I'm really super excited to be here and to talk about all things witches.
Yay, so exciting. We're so excited to have you here too. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do, a little bit about your journey?
Well, my journey did start a long time ago when I was looking for my path, my spiritual path, and I couldn't find it in any of the major religions like I was looking. I went to Jewish, I went to Catholic, I went to Episcopalian, I went to Quaker, and then I never found anything. And luckily I wasn't baptized because my father was a scientist, but I always felt spiritual. I felt the woods. I felt something calling me. I couldn't find it. And I stumbled on a book in Austria called Ich bin eine Hexe, which is translated into I am a witch. And I read that and I said, oh my God, that's what I am. And it was written by a woman, Gerlinde Schielcher, who wrote it in German in Germany. And I went up and studied with her and learned with her. And that was the start of my path. And after that, I formed many covens and been members of covens. And it has been kind of like my saving grace in my life.
Absolutely.
That was like a very quick. That was very quick.
That is perfect. A perfect overview, right? Recap. Well, we love to start all of our guest episodes with the same question. We love to get everybody's answers. So our question right now is, what does it mean to you to live a magical life?
Well, I love that question. A magical life. For me, it means connecting to everything around me, like connecting to the plants in my garden, observing the birds in the morning, testing myself. Oh, that's Tara calling me this today, and it turns out to be Tara. Being in connection with my family, my friends, my coven sisters, creating ritual spells, writing, music, creativity. Actually, I see my life as being pretty much magical. I'm very grateful for it. But for the main thing for me, magic is about connection and finding that inner connection to your inner goddess, which is within you.
I love that. It's so true. There's so much that's just available to us, right? And we always hear different variations on this question and this answer from all different people. And I love that, like, one of the common threads is this sense of like, you find it in you and you find magic all around you too.
Yeah, I think that I had this story, like I've done a lot of ritual, I've done a lot of studying, a lot of reading, and I do believe that there is this, they could say the higher magic, then there's the kitchen magic and this and that. But at one point, I was telling my students the other day, because I'm teaching magic classes online now, is that one of my most magical experiences was at Walmart. I was an organizer for Vermont Witch Camp, and some of the materials had gotten lost, and I was very frustrated because we had a lot of boxes with, whiteboards and this and that, and I needed to go to Walmart to get the materials. And I thought to myself, well, here I am in this magical land up at Vermont Witch Camp. Here I'm with these magical people. I'm a priestess. I'm all this. I don't want to go to Walmart. And Raquel, who was a co-organizer, said, I'll go with you. And it was busy and crowded. And I go in there and we're getting all the materials and I'm frustrated. And I get up to the counter. Now, I didn't share with you, my magical name is Aurora Raven Dragonfly. My dragonfly is my reclaiming part of that, my third part of my name. And anyways, I get up to the counter. I'm all frustrated and everything because I want to be up in the magical world of Vermont Witch Camp. And I see this woman standing with these beautiful silver dragonfly earrings and a dragonfly necklace. So I say to her, I say, oh my God, that is so, so beautiful, your necklace. Because reminds me of dragonfly, my name. And she goes, it's funny that you mentioned this. This is the 1 year, marking the 1 year of the death of my son who died in Afghanistan. And I went, oh, and I just like, my heart sank a little bit. And then she goes, I got to tell you this story, why I bought these. And I go, okay. And the man behind us was listening as well. And she goes, I was, about a month ago, I was out in, the loading dock smoking a cigarette. And I was still so sad about the loss of my son. And this dragonfly flies out over and lands right next to me. And in that moment, I knew that my son was communicating to me and telling me he was okay. And when she told me that, I started crying. The man behind me started crying. And I was able to think and loosen up this idea that magic only happens in ritual, magic only happens with witches. And, in that judgmental part of myself saying, oh, there's no magic in Walmart. No, there is magic everywhere. And that was my most magical moment, was there in Walmart talking to this woman and sharing with her. Or
Oh,
she
I
sharing with
love shared with you. Yeah, I love that story. It's just like as soon as you said like she had something to share, I was like, ooh, chills. Like that's going to be
Yeah,
such a good story. Oh, that's so special. And it's so true. I think that so often the moments that when you're paying attention and you notice them that are really the most magical are these tiny, tiny, funny, silly little things, that just really are so much more powerful than you realize if you're not paying attention.
exactly. So
I love
maybe
that.
being in a magical world is that shifting, as Starheart wrote in one of her first chapters, is that starlight vision, is being aware that you're shifting your awareness to realize the magic around you.
Exactly. Exactly. It's always there. You just have to open your eyes to it, right? I love that. Well, we would love to hear more about your novel. So it's so exciting because we always have, nonfiction writers. I'm a nonfiction writer, but I don't think we've ever had a novelist on. So I would love to hear more about your book.
Well, thank you. There are a lot of really great books out there, and one of your book as well, because, and it's great that there's all these nonfiction books out there. But I felt called to write a fictional book. And one of the reasons is because my writing teacher says, write about your passion. And I thought, what is my passion? Oh, my religion is my passion. There you go. And I also felt like this would be a way to share more about my belief system in witches and what happened during the burning times and what real witches and real magic might look like. Which it would be different than Charmed, Bewitched, and all the hocus pocus, which are okay, they're fine, but have a book about what really happened to women. So that's why I decided to write the book about the Witches of Riegersburg. I also asked myself the question, what if there was a historical book of shadows? Now, there isn't one, is there? But what if there was one? And what if my protagonist inherited from her grandmother, who she thought was Catholic, a book of shadows that was over 300 years old? So that is what my book is about. My book is about a young woman, probably around your age, a little younger, who inherits this book of shadows from her grandmother. And it sets her on a journey and a quest to find herself and the roots of this book. It is set in 3 time periods. In the time period where the book was then conceived and written by the Baroness from Galler, who lives in Austria, and her maid, Katrina Paldoff. Now, this castle, Riegersburg, does really exist in southern Austria, and they did have witch burnings there. Sadly enough, one year, 65 people were killed or executed as a witch. And one of them was my character, Katerina Peldoff. She was burned at the stake and called the Witch of the Flowers. So there are some triggers in there. There are some things that don't want to look at, but we do need to understand that in Europe, the witch craze raved throughout Europe and killed a lot of innocent women who were not witches, and those who were witches were also burned, and the people who had knowledge went underground. So everything from herbology, midwifery, and healing, and the healers and shamans of the women just said, we're going to go underground, right? The second time period is during Hitler Germany, where my the grandmother marries a Jewish doctor. She inherits the book, and the book is then always given to like the women in the generations, passed on to the women. They're called the faith keepers. Basically, they're keeping the goddess religion alive, right? And all of the spell work, herbs, and everything are in the book. And she goes to the States. And eventually gets passed down to Sarah Lilienthal, who's my main character, and Sarah goes on this adventure. Find out with the book to find out about it. So that's the basic what it's all about. It's a quest, it's a journey, it's self-discovery, and I don't want to give away too much.
Fair enough. And you'll have to read the book.
Yeah, and it's very women-centered. This is about women and their connections to life.
Right. Well, that's a great synopsis. I feel like there's lots of things that you didn't give away, I'm sure. So what made you choose this particular castle and this particular person from history?
Okay, that's a really good question. I lived only a half hour away from Riegersburg Castle. I actually studied music in Austria and I lived there for 20 years. So I visited it quite often, and it is a stupendous fortress. It's absolutely amazing. And they have a witches exhibition there. And so that fascinated me when I started myself studying and practicing with my German witches when I lived there. The whole story of Katrina Paldoff, who was burned as the Witch of the Flowers, and then I made up all the rest. It just fascinated me, and it was Elizabeth from Galler fascinated me too, because she was a pretty intimidating woman. She actually existed. She married 3 times. She held her fortress against the Turks. They didn't take it over. And she didn't pass on her rights to her daughter and her son-in-law, who comes out in the book too. So she was a woman with fortitude. So she interested me as well. And then her maid, Katerina Poldolf, I made them into lovers, but we don't know if that really happened.
A little creative license, right?
Yeah, a lot of creative license there. It is fictional. It is fictional.
Of course. No, this sounds so interesting. I can't wait to read the book. It's definitely a time period I'm so interested in. I know a lot of us are. It's interesting. You said they called her the Witch of the Flowers. Did you find in your research where that came from?
Yes, she could bring flowers to bloom in winter. A lot of people can do that, right? And then there's an image of her in the castle holding a flower. Yeah.
Huh. Oh, interesting. I would have been drawn to her too.
Yeah, and the other thing that's sad is that, well, not sad, but the reasons why, like Elizabeth, who was the Baroness, was not persecuted or executed because she was nobility. In Europe, most of the noble women were able not to be persecuted. It was mainly, women who were from the lower class. I hate to say that lower class, but they looked at it that way, or women who had their own property, or uppity women, older women.
Right.
Some towns there was maybe just one woman left in Germany.
Yeah, I know that Germany was really the center of so much of it, and a lot in Scotland as well. In my ancestry, I don't know if you have done any of your own ancestral work around that time. In my ancestry, well, there's a few interesting branches, but my ancestor is actually James Stewart, which I think I've talked about on the podcast. Hopefully we can find the episodes where I've talked about this and link them. But it was James Stewart, who was the half brother of Mary Queen of Scots. And he raised her son after even before she died, but he mostly raised her son, who went on to write one of the main like handbooks for witch hunters. And so there's this interesting piece in my history and my ancestry that when I learned about, I was like, they were historical figures I'd known about for a long time. I've always been interested in that time period. And then, to find, you're related to them was interesting in and of itself. But, there's so many of us have some connection, right? Whether you're descended from, someone who was affected by witch trials, someone who was a witch hunter like I am, or, even just communities that were affected. I think anyone with European ancestry really has some kind of impact from that, right?
Yeah, and then we do know that in some places in the world still people can be persecuted. We're lucky that we can have freedom of religion in America, and I think that's so important to have the separation of state, school, and religion. For me, I was a public music teacher for so long. I didn't feel comfortable. I mean, things are changing. I have to admit, I'm getting older. Things are changing. I love it. But I didn't out myself. I kept it separate. I didn't out myself till I retired in 2022. I had been a witch all this time because I got in trouble once for I was a band teacher and a music teacher. My kids were playing Harry Potter music. They loved it. And some parents got upset about it and they wrote to the principal. It was a big problem. So if Harry Potter is going to be demonized, you can imagine what the parents would have said. Some parents would have said about me. So I just kept that separate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It's
definitely changing so much, but it's also, I think, really only very recently that I think it's become more, I don't know, I don't even know if accepted is the right word, but it definitely feels like there's been such a shift even in the last 5 to 10 years. But there's also still so many communities in the US and certainly around the world that are still very much not accepting of these ideas and these paths, which, some I know is really still rooted in this like colonial spread of the beliefs from the witch trials. I mean, so much of it still goes back to that time. Not all of it, but a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me was the main thing that really drew me to witchcraft, and I see myself as a priestess too, is the idea of the divine feminine. I feel so called to the divinity of the divine feminine, and I think that that is so important. And I'm a polytheist. I believe in God and goddess and the mysterious ones, and then also, recently in the reclaiming tradition, we are including, you know. Um, not just man, not by like more non-binary discussion around divinity and deity, right? So that was so important for me because I said, where is the goddess? And then when I did my studies, I found out there were goddesses all over the world, like everywhere, so it's quite interesting, you know.
It's so true. It's something that's so
Yeah.
pervasive, so much a part of every culture, and yet somehow has become so hidden.
So hidden. And I think it's important for the healing of the world that women and men and others, folks, try to balance that out, that feminine energy with and it's not that when we think about I don't believe in matriarchy in the sense of matriarchy, but matrilinear or more power to women, doesn't mean women are going to do the same thing and go around kill all the men and put them down. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's going to look to partnership more, in my opinion. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and I think that's a common like misconception around like feminism in general, right? Is it's like it's not about like taking over the world, right? It's about actually having equal and partnerships and, shared responsibility and so many things that are so much more complex than kind of the way it gets boiled down, right?
Exactly. They also, when I've been teaching, I've been rereading Starhawk's book that I've read like several times, is that there's no archaeological, scientific backing that witches ever did these kind of like sacrificial things. They didn't do that. That you when you know, do you know Marija Jambuta's The Language of the Goddess, where she
I don't think
explored,
so.
she's an archaeologist and she studied all of old Europe, and they don't find that. They weren't these sacrifices. What the kind of blood that was used was living blood. That means when we have our menstrual cycles, we use our living blood to fertilize the garden or whatever is going on.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I think
yeah,
that's so much of, what little really we know of like historical, magical practices, especially within Europe where they have been so obscured. So much of it is written or passed down in these like, very what's the word I'm for, like opaque kinds of ways, right? Like all of these names that sound like, animal parts are actually just names of plants, like there's so many things that I think, whether some very much intentionally, and some I think would imagine also for witches to be able to hide, right? Some done to them and some done by themselves, really obscured so much of what was really going on. And and then I think it's interesting that like in the early 20th century, so much of it was reclaimed and so much of it was also made up at that point. As it's now, it's like in the we're I guess we're heading towards the mid 21st century. It's almost like we're not only reclaiming truly the old ways, but we're also like clearing away some of the fog that was put on in the early 20th century as well.
yeah, I like that, the way you said clearing the fog. That's excellent. I also like it that, people think that, witches always look a certain way. No, they can just look like normal people.
You can meet
I just,
witches in Walmart, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am writing my second novel, and I'm getting to the end of my seventh draft. I have one chapter left, and it's a sequel to my first one.
Well, that's very
And
exciting.
yes, I'm so excited, and I'm sending it off to my line editor probably next week, and then hopefully be published by summer. And two of the characters from the first novel are in the second novel. And in the second novel, they come to the States on a quest. And this is all based on books I read, Holy Grail Bloodline, or what was this? Holy Grail, Holy Bloodline, The Marian Mysteries, The Secret of Oak Island by Zen Halpern. All these books about this idea that the Templar Grail and objects are hidden here in the States. So one of my characters reads a prophecy in the secret book that leads them to come to the States, and they go on a journey here to
Oh,
find
that
the
sounds so
yeah,
fun.
magic
That sounds like
here, and they
amazing.
go on a journey, kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a Dan Brown stuff. I keep coming up with these journeys, and there's a lot of native characters, indigenous people in my second novel. I was very worried about that, because when we talk about sacred and spiritual things, because indigenous people were not allowed to practice their religion for so many years, up till I think the 1975 or something, that was forbidden, which is absolutely horrendous. But I did get a sensitivity reader who was a young Native man from Alberta who helped me, so I could my portrayal would be respectful.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. And that's so great to get a real perspective, not only to make sure that what you're writing is respectful, but also to get some of that like inside knowledge, right? Like that's so important in whenever we're talking about any kind of culture or any kind of practice, even, right? Is like we said in your intro, like you've studied with so many different people. I love that your practice and your books are so informed by different perspectives.
Yeah, the thing is that you might have noticed this too. I've been now back in the States for 20 years, and I practice a lot outside. We do ritual outside. I've been in many covens. We connect to the trees, the the ground, the rocks and everything. And I don't know how you can, as a witch or as somebody spiritual who's connected to nature, connect to this area to the States anywhere without being aware of the native spirits that are there. How can you not? I mean, they lived here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Their very bones are in the earth, connected to the trees. So I constantly am getting, you know, visions and things coming from the past. So because of that, we have also started this practice in the reclaiming tradition that before we start our rituals, we always do land acknowledgments, and we might say, like, I live on the unceded land of the Haudenosaunee, and we tell us where we live, and we honor that because we are doing ritual then on their land. And then Vermont Witch Camp does tithe to it's the Abenaki up in Vermont. We tithe, I can't remember how much percentage of our income that we have. We tithe. It's 133 people, and we have organizers, and not always the same people organizing, but we have somebody who is a liaison with the people, the Abenaki people who live there, and so we tithe a certain amount of our income to that group, that people. I don't saying tribe is, I want to say tribe, but you don't really want to say that. It's not really acceptable these days. But
Sure.
so, and that's something I'll probably do with my book too. I've been thinking of tithing hopefully it sells 3% too. I have to look up something up what I want to, which exactly what foundation, but it will be definitely for land back rights for the native people.
I love that. And I thank you for sharing those specific ideas too, because I know that's something that, people sometimes like, I want to help, I want to be supportive, I want to acknowledge, but like, how do I do it? How do I go about that? So it's really cool to hear not only an individual and what your own practices with that are, but also, organizations. It's great to hear organizations doing things. At Lupin Hollow, we do the way we've been doing it is 5% of profits for whatever the profits are for the quarter. We choose a different organization every quarter to donate to. And we have a list on the website of organizations that we choose from. And they're not always like land acknowledgement sorts of things, but we have done some of those in the past. I should put it on my list to make sure we get one of those organizations in for 2024. Awesome. Okay. Well,
yeah, that's just something for me. I think there's so much that we could work on and donate to. So I think that, being social human beings is we're all interconnected, in my
it's so
opinion.
true. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think like you said that, right? Like as witches, like how can we not know how interconnected we are, right? To the people who currently live on our land or used to live on our land or have had experiences around us or in our ancestry, right? There's so many ways that we're all tied together. And we all have these like shared experiences in one way or another. And I do think that that maybe that's one of the ways, I know one of the like witch wounds that often comes up from the time of the witch trials is this fear of having money, right? This fear of having something that can be taken, basically. And it's that so many of us, it's so pervasive. And I don't know, maybe that's one of the ways we start to heal that wound collectively, right? Is to not only have something for ourselves, but also be able to share it with each other and others in the community and to do healing with it.
I think that is a fabulous point that you brought up because I know that for a fact. Like I've been in a lot of covens and places where there's this like, oh, you can never charge money, kind of thing. And then I see all like you and a lot of other younger women saying, no, we're going to claim that our knowledge is worth a compensation. Right. And I like that. And the way you explained it just now makes so sense to me because the church did a grab like in Austria. The women who were widows, they accused them of witchcraft and then they took their land and their money, right? So I think that's a good point. It's not only about being, I'm sorry, my phone just went, about being, like out there and showing yourself, but it's about like, oh, if I have something, they could take it away from me. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think writing about the witch trials and bringing that to light and like, it's one of those time periods I think so many of us who identify as witches like have always been fascinated by and drawn to and felt some kind of connection to. But I think we think of it as like, oh, it's this thing in the past, right? Like, oh, sure, there are places in the world where people are still persecuted, or there are places in the world where, you might not be persecuted, but you still don't necessarily feel safe being a witch. And we think that's the correlation. But I think actually the correlation is all the ways we inherited this fear that could happen to us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I believe in rebirth. So, who knows what, I've experienced in some of the covens. I can't, tell who that is because it's private, but I can say that people have experienced that in past life transgressions, or not transgressions. What is that called? Past life trances, not trans, where they were. I know I'm laughing about it. It's not supposed to be laughing about witch
Oh
burnings.
my
Oh
gosh,
my
I
God.
know, but
Yeah.
okay, I don't know. Maybe
Oh
there
my
was a
God.
Freudian.
I'm so sorry. I got so off transgressions. No, trances. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
absolutely.
it's not really something to laugh about. And then, also the Gnostics and a lot of men were killed too. Anybody who didn't believe in what the standard of the Catholic Church was, or the Lutherans, or the also the Calvinists, they took them over. When I studied it, I got a little sick to my stomach, I have to admit.
No, there are definitely aspects of everything that happened. And I mean, just the idea that so many people could be taken and affected. And, we see it in different ways in different parts of history. But yeah, it is very, when we don't compartmentalize it, right, and we really just confront it as what it was and what happened, and the people, we think of them as people and not just, historical statistics, or even current day statistics, right? That's when we really, and that's when we really also form that connection, right? Like, we actually connect with, these were people and this is what they experienced, and I've inherited something, whether I'm descended from them directly or just through society or whatever, right? Like you said at the beginning, right?
Right.
We have these connections to others.
Yeah, but on a good note, though, I feel so excited to. I mean, I joined after I retired. I joined all Instagram and then TikTok and all these social platforms, and I'm so like amazed at like the people at claiming to be witches and spiritual and different and pagans. I'm like, wow, it's like almost exploding for me. And in central New York, we have all these shops. I'm serious. There's shops, crystal shops, this shop, this sprouting up. It's like, it's almost, I mean, when I started out, this wasn't going on. I'll tell you, it wasn't. But
I
now
mean,
I feel
that's
like
the
it's
thing. I've talked about this before on the podcast and on interviews I've done and stuff, that, when I first practiced, which was like 15-ish years ago, it was not remotely like this. Like, I'm in California, like, crystal shops have always kind of been a thing.
yeah.
We've always had crystal shops, but, and we have a few, like the town that I live in, like our little witchy metaphysical shop has been here for 30 years, but it was
Yeah.
just the one, and now it's like every town in the area has a witchy shop or has a crystal shop. And, the my local Barnes and Noble, like where my book is on the shelf, is right by the front door. It's not in the back upstairs corner like it used to be. Like, there really has been a very big shift. And I agree. I mean, I think it'll be very interesting to see where that goes, what happens, how much more acceptance we have because of that.
Yeah, and then there's a huge online presence now that wasn't there before too, I find, which I think is good because then people, I mean, at first I'm not really an online person. I do like to be in person, but with COVID and everything, when we were forced to go online, I did realize that the silver lining is I get to meet a lot of cool people from around the country because we had a couple large rituals in the reclaiming our reclaiming groups. But they also started the reclaiming witchcraft groups. They started a worldwide online um, witchcraft meeting or whatever. They do it now, not because before we would just meet in person, right? And they're all over. I don't know if you've heard of the California camp and British Columbia. And now they have a worldwide one where they meet from everywhere. Which
That
I
is
think is so
so
cool.
cool. I
Online,
agree. I
yeah.
definitely think that that's a bonus, a pro of being online is I get to work with people all over the world and talk to people doing all different things that you just never would have had. You know, you were connected with your people who were doing similar things to you, which is its own kind of, you know, powerful thing. But yeah, being able to talk to all different people and get all different perspectives is just really, it's really amazing. So
So
like conversations like this one.
yeah, like this. I'm doing my first magical writing workshop up in Canada at Wild Ginger in June. So I
Oh,
wasn't sure, I'm a teacher. I was a teacher, and I like to teach my magic workshops too about about ritual and goddess worship, but now I'm going to teach my first magical writing workshop, so I'm really super excited. That might be something I might do more of. You maybe that's something you might want in your one of your witch conventions, but I'm going to try it out in person first with another sister in witch, and then we'll see how it goes.
oh, that's so exciting. Well, it sounds like you have lots of really fun, exciting things
Yeah.
going on. Wait, can you tell people a little bit more about where they can find you and where they can connect with you?
Yeah, my book is on Amazon. I have it on Kindle. There's the cover, The Witches of Riegersburg. It's an indie publisher from New York. She published it for me. The Amaryllis series is going to call because it comes back every year. It's reborn, and you can find it on Amazon. It's in Kindle, um, Audible by a fantastic actress who happens to be a witch, who I know, and paperback. And then I also have a website, www.julieannestratton.org, which you can click on, and then it will move you over to Amazon.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, we'll link your website and everything in the show notes below the episode. And thanks so much for being here, Julie.
Oh, it was so great to meet you. I'd like to find out more about you.
Oh, you're so
Maybe
sweet.
I mean, I have read I've watched your Instagram and what, read through things, but you know, I would be interested in finding
Oh,
out more.
well, thank you. Well, we'll definitely connect. Thanks for being here,
Okay.
everybody.
It was great to meet
As always, thanks for listening to the Empowered Modern Witches Show. I'm Tanae Stewart, the Witch of Lupin Hollow, and it's my pleasure to be your host. If you loved this episode, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Much love from Lupin Hollow.